Man, let me tell you what went down on SportsCenter today because it caught everybody off guard. We've got breaking news with the New York Knicks, and this one really turned heads. The team has made a surprising decision heading into training camp, and honestly, it just adds to what has already been one of the wildest Septembers Knicks fans have seen in years. Every single week, it feels like Leon Rose is pulling another move out of the hat, stacking up this roster piece by piece, and now we've got the latest update. Training camp is about to be one of the most competitive camps the Knicks have ever hosted, and you can feel the buzz building around who's actually going to earn those final roster spots. And listen, this hasn't just been your typical slow build to the season. It's been constant movement. Every time you think they might be done, boom! Another deal drops, another signing announced. SportsCenter broke it down, and what makes it even more exciting is the timing. Media Day is right around the corner, so all of this is happening while the entire league is shifting back into full swing. Knicks fans don't even get a chance to catch their breath before the next headline pops up. Now, here's where things got really interesting. A lot of the conversation recently has been about those two-way contracts and how New York was going to use them. Everybody knew Kevin McCuller Jr. had one of those spots locked up, so in reality, they had two other slots to play with. The question was, who would they give those to? There was speculation about rookies, a lot of chatter about which young guys might get the nod. Names were floating around, people were guessing left and right, but nothing was concrete until now. Because SportsCenter confirmed it, straight from the reporting. The Knicks are giving those two-way contracts to Trey Jemison, Kevin McCuller Jr., and Tosen Ebuman. Boom! 3 players, 3 very different skill sets, and all of them officially part of the Knicks picture heading into camp. That was the moment where you could feel the panel light up, because this wasn't just a throwaway move. This was New York making a statement that they're covering their bases, addressing needs, and making sure Mike Brown has plenty of options to evaluate. And you know what? The first name they dove into was Jemison, and that made total sense, because out of the 3, he's probably the most recognizable to NBA fans. His path has been unique. He's bounced around a bit, but everywhere he's gone, he's shown flashes that make you think this guy could stick if given the right situation. That's what had everyone leaning in, because the Knicks might actually be that situation. SportsCenter laid it out. Jemison's resume is short but telling. He's been in the league just a couple of years, played for multiple teams, and along the way, he's had stretches where he's looked like a real contributor. And for a Knicks team that has questions around big man depth, this is exactly the kind of under-the-radar signing that could prove valuable. Remember, Mitchell Robinson has dealt with his share of injuries, Ariel Hukporti is still proving himself after his own health issues, and while Karl Anthony Towns can man that position, he's also going to be relied on heavily at the 4. That leaves plenty of room for someone like Jemison to come in and fight for real minutes. And here's the kicker. SportsCenter reminded us that Jemison's biggest advantage over someone like Alex Len is that he can sign a two-way. That flexibility matters. It gives the Knicks an easier pathway to plug him in when needed without committing a full roster spot right away. That's a big deal when you're talking about a team with championship aspirations, because it means you can experiment, you can adjust on the fly, and you can reward production without messing up roster balance. So yeah, that was the first deep dive, and the way the crew broke it down really made it clear the Knicks aren't just throwing darts at the wall here. They're being intentional, they're being strategic, and they're making sure every box is checked heading into camp. And let's be real, if Jemison can seize that opportunity, he's got a real chance to carve out a role, including Kevin McCuller Jr. Now, Knicks fans, this is the name that jumps out the most, because we all remember when the Knicks took him late in the draft, with the 56th overall pick. At the time, it felt like a real steal, because here's a guy who at one point was being talked about as a possible first-round talent. The only reason he slipped that far was because of the knee injury that slowed him down and kept him from showing his best self during the pre-draft process. So instead of hearing his name called early, he slid all the way to the back end, and the Knicks decided to take the gamble. And let's be honest, that gamble is already looking like a smart one. New York gave him patience, gave him time to fully heal, and once he got healthy, we immediately started to see why he was so highly regarded. First with the G League, then with the Summer League roster, he showed flashes of exactly the kind of player the Knicks thought they were getting. In Vegas this year, McCuller went off 21.5 points per game, hitting 51% from the field and an elite 91% from the free throw line. Those aren't empty stats either. He showed confidence, poise, and the ability to compete on both ends. On top of the scoring, he chipped in across the board. 5 rebounds, a couple of assists each night, really showing he could fit into different roles. Now, his Summer League run ended early because of that facial contusion. The Knicks didn't push it, and they didn't need to. They'd already seen enough. They saw a guy who was producing at a high level and proving he could hang. And it wasn't just in Vegas. Back in the G League, he gave them 13 solid games of production, 11.6 points, 4.8 rebounds, 4.2 assists. Not superstar numbers, but exactly what you want from a young player developing in that system. So, when you look at McCuller now locking in a two-way deal, it almost feels like the most predictable move of the offseason. He was basically already in that role last year, and now he's back again by picking up the qualifying offer. The interesting part is the bigger picture. The Knicks genuinely see McCuller as part of their future. The catch, though, is the financial side. They don't currently have the flexibility to convert him into a standard NBA deal. They've been upfront about that with him, but that doesn't mean they don't value him. In fact, it's the opposite. They've made it clear that they like him more than what a simple two-way slot represents. And McCuller knows it. He's buying in, understanding that his chance will come. If there's one guy on the fringes of the roster who could actually break through and earn real minutes, it's him. Whether that's as an injury replacement, a situational defender, or someone who just forces his way onto the floor by being too good to ignore, the pathway is there. Of course, the Knicks are being careful. He looks healthy, but that knee injury is still in the rear view, and they want to make sure he's fully set up to succeed long-term. The good news? McCuller isn't some raw teenager. After 5 years in college, he's more mature, more experienced, and doesn't need a drawn-out timeline. It feels like it's only a matter of time, maybe later this season, maybe next year, before he ends up with a standard NBA contract in New York. And then, we've got to talk about Tosen Ebuman. This is another intriguing addition. He comes over after spending last season with Brooklyn, and right away, you can see why the Knicks wanted him. I actually called it before it happened, that he would be a great fit, and now, here he is on a two-way deal. For Ebuman, this makes perfect sense. He probably could have chased other opportunities, but strategically, this was the best move. On a team like the Knicks, he provides depth at multiple forward spots, and his defense and versatility check all the boxes this front office looks for. Signing a two-way doesn't close any doors for him, it actually opens one. It's a chance to show enough to earn a real roster spot, and that's exactly what he's setting out to do. His resume is solid. 28 NBA games with Brooklyn last year, averaging nearly double figures with 5 points, grabbing over 4 rebounds, dishing out a couple assists. He shot just under 43% from the floor, 31% from deep. Not lights-out shooting, but enough to keep defenses honest. His PER was around 11, which shows he was contributing when on the floor. But the biggest calling card? His defense. Even with the offensive inconsistencies, he's already built a reputation as a high-energy, switchable defender who can guard multiple positions. And it doesn't stop there. He also tore it up in the G League with Long Island, averaging 20 points, 7.6 rebounds, and 3.3 assists. That's the kind of production that shows he's not just surviving at the NBA fringe, he's pushing for more. Add in his college career at Princeton, where he was one of the top playmakers in the Ivy League, leading the conference in assists 2 straight years, and you get the full picture of a player who's more than just a role guy. At 6.7, able to swing between small forward and power forward, he gives the Knicks depth they didn't have and fits the profile of someone who can step in sooner rather than later. With Ebuman locked in, though, it does bring up a tough consequence. Dink Pate didn't get the two-way spot. That means after his Exhibit 10 deal runs out, Unless he somehow pushes past another guy in training camp, he's likely headed straight to the G League roster. And once he's there, the Knicks don't fully control his rights. Another team could scoop him up, and that's a real concern. A lot of fans were hoping he'd secure one of those precious two-way contracts, and the fact that he didn't leaves some uncertainty. Do the Knicks not see what the fans do? Or are they simply prioritizing more NBA-ready guys for now? It's something we'll have to keep an eye on. At the end of the day, though, this is how roster building works. You can't keep everyone. Some players slip through, and others step up. For now, the Knicks are betting on McCuller and Ama to be those guys who can contribute, develop, and eventually push for standard contracts. It's a balancing act between managing the cap, keeping flexibility, and still stockpiling talent. And while fans may disagree on certain moves, the overall strategy is clear: depth, versatility, and patience. So, while the McCuller situation feels steady, and Ama's arrival feels like upside, the Dink Pate question mark remains. We'll see how that plays out. Until then, Knicks fans just have to stay tuned, because this front office clearly has a plan, and it's all about keeping options open while continuing to strengthen the pipeline of talent. What's going on, everyone? So, the Knicks have made a truly shocking move that's sending waves through the league. While their training camp roster was supposed to be set, New York decided to waive not just one, but two key players. And honestly, many are calling it a huge mistake. On top of that, there's a player who's still on the roster that probably shouldn't even be there, which makes this whole situation even more puzzling. We're going to break down all the latest reports today, dissect why these moves happened so quickly, and what this could mean for the Knicks heading into the season. And before we dive in, make sure you hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you don't miss any of this Knicks coverage. So, let's start with the waivers. The Knicks waived two players in an incredibly fast sequence, and if you're just looking at the list of signings, it's easy to see why fans are scratching their heads. Just yesterday, New York went from 0 to 100 in the blink of an eye. They signed a total of 11 players in a single day. Yes, 11. That's almost unheard of. Shout out to Steph Bondi and the New York basketball app for keeping us updated with all the moves, because tracking this is no small task. Here's the full rundown of the 21 training camp invites, including their contract designations. OG Anunoby, Mikal Bridges, Malcolm Brogdon, he's on a non-guaranteed deal, Jalen Brunson, Jordan Clarkson, Pacome Deer, Mohamed Dawara, who's also non-guaranteed, Tosen Ebuman on a two-way contract, Josh Hart, Ariel Huckporty, Trey Ginson III on a two-way deal, Tyler Kack, Alex Len non-guaranteed, Garrison Matthews non-guaranteed, Miles McBride, Kevin McCuller Jr. On a two-way, Mitchell Robinson, Matt Ryan non-guaranteed, Landry Shamet non-guaranteed, Karl Anthony Towns, and rounding it out, Gershon Yabusele. That is a stacked roster for training camp, no doubt about it. But here's where it gets tricky. In putting together this roster, the Knicks made a couple of glaring oversights. Did anyone notice that Dink Pate and Bryson Warren were not on that initial list? I did. And here's the interesting part. Yesterday, New York announced two more signings, Dink Pate and Bryson Warren, both on what's called an Exhibit 10 contract. For those unfamiliar, these are essentially training camp deals with incentives to join the Knicks Westchester affiliate if waived. Dink Pate even took to social media after signing, posting something like, "Them folks just thought I was going to quit," along with some prayer emoji, which really gives you a peek into his mindset. As for Bryson Warren, if that name rings a bell, it should. The Knicks acquired him after trading the rights to Moses Brown. Warren also shined in the Miami Heat Summer League, though unfortunately, a hamstring injury kept him out for the rest of the games. Now here's where the controversy comes in. Right after signing both Pate and Warren, the Knicks announced they had waived them. Both were Exhibit 10 deals, meaning there's a financial incentive for them to join Westchester, but why sign them only to waive them almost immediately? According to reports from Ian Begley at NYNBA and Knicks Insider, This was largely about salary cap management. New York couldn't technically include an Exhibit 9 clause in either contract because they were under 14 players on standard contracts. If either player got injured during workouts or training camp, the Knicks would have been fully responsible for their salary. To put it in perspective, an Exhibit 9 deal only guarantees a player $15,000. It's a protective mechanism for team. Bobby Marks, ESPN's CBA expert, confirmed the same reasoning, and he broke it down really clearly. An Exhibit 10 contract protects a team from financial liability if a player gets hurt in camp or preseason, but a team needs at least 14 players on standard contracts before signing anyone to Exhibit 9. Without that protection, any injury could have become a costly financial burden for the Knicks. That's why both Pate and Warren were waived so quickly. It wasn't necessarily a judgment on their talent or potential, but purely a cap management and risk mitigation decision. So, to summarize, the Knicks waived these young players almost immediately to protect themselves financially while still giving them a path to stay within the organization via Westchester. It's a move that might look shocking on the surface, but once you understand the CBA and cap implications, it starts to make more sense, though it still leaves fans wondering about roster strategy and the overall decision-making process. So, picking up where we left off, the main issue here comes down to financial responsibility and cap management. By waiving Dink Pate and Bryson Warren so quickly, the Knicks avoided being on the hook for their full contracts if either of them were to get injured during training camp. Remember, both players were on Exhibit 10 deal, which don't offer full injury protection like an Exhibit 9 would. And because New York didn't have the roster size to legally issue Exhibit 9 contracts, their hands were essentially tied. The only viable option: sign them quickly, waive them immediately, and create the proper financial incentives for them to report to the Knicks' Westchester G League team. And honestly, this wasn't just my interpretation. Ian Begley and ESPN's cap experts have confirmed this logic, and Sports Illustrated reported essentially the same thing. According to SI, Payton and Warren are expected to resurface with the Knicks' G League club in Westchester, where their returning player rights are held. If they stay unsigned elsewhere, they have a clear financial incentive to join Westchester, which was always New York's plan. The difference here is that the front office executed this plan much faster than anyone expected. And while the reasoning is clear, it's still controversial among fans who wanted to see these young players compete in training camp. And here's the big point. By waiving these two players so quickly, the Knicks lose out on an opportunity to actually evaluate them against the rest of the training camp roster. Could they have outperformed some of the other non-guaranteed guys? Could they have earned more minutes, more opportunities, or even a roster spot? We'll never know because New York decided to move fast. Now, while we're talking about questionable roster decisions, there's one player on this training camp roster who frankly should not be here: Matt Ryan. I mean, let's be honest, keeping Matt Ryan on a training camp deal while waiving Dink Pate and Bryson Warren seems backwards. I get it. Ryan is a knockdown shooter, a lethal three-point marksman when open. But if you can't defend at a high level, especially in the NBA, I really don't want you on the roster. The Knicks have multiple players who can shoot and defend, like Landry Shamet or even Malcolm Brogdon when healthy. So why dedicate a roster spot to someone who doesn't bring the full package? Let's break it down. Matt Ryan on this roster is taking up a slot that could go to a younger player with potential, someone who can develop both ends of the court. Dink Pate and Bryson Warren fit that bill. They're athletic, versatile, and still growing. They could have benefited immensely from a full training camp experience, proving themselves against higher-level competition. Instead, we have Ryan, who may contribute as a shooter in limited situations, but is a defensive liability and not a two-way candidate. And in terms of roster mechanic, the Knicks' two-way slots are already filled, so Ryan doesn't even have the option to be moved into that role. Now, to give you some additional context, let's talk about the Knicks' expectations for this season. According to FanDuel, the Knicks' regular season win total has actually dropped slightly over the past few weeks, from 54 wins to 53, and now sitting at 52.5. The over is at 115, the under at 105, meaning Vegas is cautious about the exact ceiling for this team. But New York's goal is clear: prove they can hit or surpass that 52-win mark. And realistically, they have a very good chance to do so, especially if their roster decisions are executed properly. That's why the inclusion of Matt Ryan is so baffling to me. Yes, he can shoot the three, but we already have multiple shooters who can defend, and we are essentially wasting a valuable training camp slot that could have been used to further develop Dink Pate or Bryson Warren. From a development standpoint, that's a real missed opportunity. From a competitive standpoint, it makes you question the prioritization of the roster. Regardless, this is the Knicks' approach under Leon Rose. And even if I don't fully agree with keeping Matt Ryan on the camp roster, I still believe in the direction Leon Rose is taking the franchise. He's constantly making moves to improve this roster and push the team forward, whether it's through trades, signings, or development decisions. My job as a fan and an analyst is to recognize that, even if I question specific roster choices like this one. So, the question I leave with you guys is this: how do you feel about these quick waivers and roster decisions? Are you on board with the Knicks' strategy? Or do you think waiving Pate and Warren while keeping Matt Ryan was a major misstep? I'd love to hear your thoughts. Drop them down in the comments. Do you love it, hate it, or are you somewhere in the middle? So, let's wrap this up. When you step back and look at the Knicks' moves over the past couple of days, it's clear that the front office is trying to balance development, roster flexibility, and salary cap considerations all at once. But it's still pretty shocking to see the team sign all of these players to training camp deals. 11 signings in a single day, mind you, only to waive Dink Pate and Bryson Warren almost immediately afterward. It's a move that makes sense from a financial and cap management standpoint, but from a purely basketball perspective, it's hard not to shake your head. These are young, talented players who could have contributed, who could have challenged for real minutes, and we don't even get the chance to see that because of how quickly New York acted. And then there's the other side of the equation, keeping Matt Ryan on the training camp roster while these two promising players are waived. Honestly, it's a perplexing decision. Ryan is a knockdown shooter, no doubt, but he brings almost nothing defensively and occupies a roster spot that could have gone to someone like Pate or Warren, players who are more versatile, younger, and capable of contributing on both ends of the floor. From a team-building perspective, that's a real opportunity cost. You're essentially prioritizing shooting in isolation over overall team balance and player development. It's a strategy that, at least on paper, raises a lot of eyebrow. But here's the thing: we also have to give credit where credit is due. Leon Rose and the Knicks front office clearly have a long-term plan in mind. Every move they make, whether we fully understand it or not, seems to be about building a roster that can compete now while also retaining flexibility for the future. Yes, I might question the specifics, like the inclusion of Matt Ryan or the rapid waiving of Pate and Warren, but I get the overarching vision. They're thinking about financial protection, player incentives, and ultimately creating a path for sustained success. And when you look at it from that perspective, even the controversial moves start to make more sense. So, what does all this mean for Knicks fans heading into training camp? Well, it means we're going to have to pay attention to who emerges from the remaining roster, who earns minutes in camp, and who might still find a path back onto the team through the G League or other opportunities. It also means that the development pipeline, especially players like Pate and Warren, will be closely monitored as they report to Westchester. If they perform well, we could see them back in a Knicks uniform sooner than expected. At the end of the day, the takeaway is this: New York made some bold, controversial decisions, balancing risk, reward, and financial logistics in a way that not every fan will agree with. They waived two promising young players, kept a shooter who is limited defensively, and are relying on the G League system to continue player development. But despite all of that, there's still reason for optimism. The roster is deep, versatile, and there's a clear plan being executed at the top level. You know, guys, I was watching SportsCenter earlier, And one of the big topics that came up was the New York Knicks and the way they've been operating lately. And let me just tell you, it's official now. The Knicks are showing us exactly what direction they're going in. The conversation on the show really broke it all down, and when you listen closely, it becomes clear. The Knicks have been making move after move, and these aren't random additions. These moves are telling us everything about how they view their younger players and what the future of this roster is supposed to look like. Now, I know we've all been waiting to see what the plan was going to be. For months, we've had speculation, a lot of uncertainty. Were they going to lean into the young guys? Were they going to move them for veterans? Were they going to go all in on free agency? Well, over the past couple of weeks, especially here in September, the Knicks have essentially tipped their hand. They've gone on this crazy stretch of signings. I mean, name after name after name. We're talking Landry Shamet, Malcolm Brogdon, Garrison Matthews, Alex Len, Matt Ryan, and honestly, there are even more names in that pile. And let's not forget the trade they just made involving Moses Brown. The point is, the Knicks aren't sitting still, and every one of these moves is connected to what they want the roster to look like, not just for now, but for the next 2 or 3 years. And what the guys on SportsCenter pointed out, which I totally agree with, is that these signings also shine a light on who the Knicks might be phasing out. Because when you start bringing in this many players to compete for those depth spots, you're basically telling the world, we've seen enough of some of our young guys. We don't view them as central pieces anymore. That's the harsh reality of the NBA. Not everybody makes the cut. And when you sign this many players, you're inevitably squeezing others out of the picture. One of the most interesting names that came up was Dink Pate. Now, the Knicks just signed him to an Exhibit 10 deal. And if you watched Summer League, you know this kid turned heads. SportsCenter broke it down perfectly. This is a 6'8" guard. A true guard, not just a wing, who has the ball handling, the athleticism, and the upside to be something special. We're talking about a guy who, if developed properly, could end up playing 1 through 4 because of his size and skill set. The Knicks clearly wanted to lock his rights in, even if the plan, as reported by Stefan Bondy, is to waive him before training camp. That's the business side of the Exhibit 10. You waive the player, he gets his $58,000 or bonus, and then more often than not, he ends up on your G League roster. And let me just say this, Pate might technically be waived, but the Knicks don't want him going anywhere. They see him as a project worth investing in, and I actually think he's going to be in the mix for one of those two-way contracts. If you look back at his numbers with the Mexico City Capitanes and his time with G League Ignite, you can see why. He averaged double digits in scoring, grabbed boards, created for teammates, and while his jump shot has always been a question mark, there's a little hitch in it that scouts worry about, he quieted some of those doubts this past summer. In Summer League, he was putting up around 10 points a game, close to 6.5 rebounds, nearly 3 assists, and he shot almost 90% from the free throw line while knocking down half his threes. That's not just a guy trying to get by, that's a guy showing he can really impact a game in multiple ways. And on SportsCenter, they made the point that this is exactly the type of prospect the Knicks need to hold on to. You don't know if he'll become a starter or a star, but with his size, skill set, and mentality, he's the kind of young piece you want to develop in-house. So, yeah, it's official. The Knicks have shown their hand, and the moves are speaking louder than any press release could. They're adding veterans to solidify the rotation, but they're also protecting young talent like Dink Pate, signaling that they're building a blend of experience and future potential. And with all the speculation about Malcolm Brogdon, Landry Shamet, and how those deals could affect the rest of the roster, you just know this story is still developing. So after the segment about Dink Pate, SportsCenter shifted gears and started talking about the other names the Knicks have been signing, and honestly, this is where things really get interesting. The Knicks aren't just adding filler bodies for camp, they're targeting very specific profiles of young talent, and 2 of those names stood out, Bryson Warren and Muhammad Diawara. Now let me start with Warren, because this was one of those pickups that caught me off guard. The Knicks went out and signed him to an Exhibit 10 deal after acquiring his rights in that Moses Brown trade. And here's the thing, Warren is only 20 years old, 6'3", a wiry 174 pounds, but he's already shown he can put up numbers. Last season, with the Sioux Falls Skyforce, Miami's G League affiliate, he averaged over 11 points per game, along with nearly 4 assists and about 3 rebounds in limited minutes. That doesn't sound like much at first, but then you hear about the night he completely exploded. 40 points, 10 rebounds, 9 assists, and 3 steals against none other than the Westchester Knicks. That's the kind of performance you don't forget. And clearly, the Knicks didn't, because you could tell from the way SportsCenter framed it. New York saw what he did firsthand, and they decided, yeah, that's the kind of guy we want to bring in. The conversation on the show dug a little deeper too. Warren has been grinding through Summer League for 2 years with Miami. His first go-round, he barely touched the court, but by his second summer, you could see the progress. In the California Classic, he was averaging double figures on really efficient shooting splits, 46% from the floor, 50% from deep, and over 80% from the free throw line. On top of that, he was giving you steals, rebounds, and playmaking. That's the profile of a young guard who hasn't had his breakthrough yet, but has all the ingredients to at least earn a spot in the league. And when you're the Knicks, and you're constantly looking for affordable depth, someone like Warren makes a ton of sense. He adds youth to the backcourt rotation, and he still has time to grow into something more. But the big story, and what SportsCenter really emphasized, was Mohamed Diawara. This is the Knicks' second-round pick from this year's draft, taken 51st overall, and they've now signed him to an Exhibit 10 deal as well. Diawara comes from France. He's only 21. And while his stats overseas don't jump off the page, that doesn't mean much in a European system where minutes and roles are so spread out. Last season between Paris Basketball and Poitiers Basket 86, he averaged about 6 points, 2 rebounds, and an assist in just 16 minutes a night. But what's important is that he was part of a Paris team that won the Euro Cup in 2024, which gave him high-level experience before even stepping into the NBA system. The report on SportsCenter made it clear that the Knicks have a long-term plan for him. Ian Begley even mentioned that the expectation is Diawara won't stay on an Exhibit 10 for long. The front office intends to bring him back after camp or early in the season on a rookie free agent deal. And by waiting a little bit, the Knicks save some money against that second apron. It's smart cap management, the kind of maneuvering you have to do when you're operating with such a tight payroll. What I loved most about Diawara's story was his own attitude. He came out and said flat out, "I'll take whatever role they give me, standard deal, two-way, G League. I just want to be part of this plan." That's a 21-year-old showing maturity beyond his years, and you could tell from his comments that the Knicks gave him a vision for how he can fit in long-term. That matters. When a young player feels like the organization has a roadmap for him, it makes it easier to buy into the grind. And let's not ignore the trend here. The Knicks have now invested in French talent in back-to-back years. First, Pacome Dadier, now Diawara. They also brought in Gershon Yabusele this offseason. Clearly, the front office has noticed what's happening in French basketball, whether it's Wembanyama, Alex Sarr, or others. And they're buying in. And honestly, why not? France has become a hotbed for skilled, versatile forwards, and the Knicks are stacking their roster with that profile. On SportsCenter, they even floated the idea that this commitment probably means Dadiet isn't going anywhere in a trade. If you're doubling down on young French forwards, it wouldn't make sense to ship out the one you just drafted last year. And one last nugget that came up about Warren, while all this Knicks news is swirling, he's literally in China right now representing Team USA in the U23 3x3 World Cup. That says something about how much USA basketball values his skill set. So when you put it all together, it feels like New York is taking flyers on the right types of guys. They're cheap, they're young, they have upside, and they don't handcuff you financially. So to sum up this part of what I saw on SportsCenter, the Knicks are moving with intent. Warren gives them another developmental guard. Diawara fits their international scouting strategy, and both players buy them time while the front office continues to chase bigger fish. He was putting up steals, knocking down shots, and finishing around 40% from the field. So clearly, there's something there to work with. Yes, he's still raw, and yes, there are plenty of areas where development is needed, but the flashes are undeniable. You see moments where he really does look like that Pascal Siakam type of player, the exact kind of athletic, versatile forward that the Knicks are hoping to mold for the future. It's all about consistency now, and that's what this next stretch of games and practices is going to reveal. The big question is how it all plays out long-term. Will he take that next step and earn a deal, or will it be somebody else in this group who emerges as the priority? Personally, I've said it before, and I'll say it again. My pick would be Dank Paid. No disrespect to Diwara whatsoever. He's got talent and upside. But for me, Dank Paid just looks a little bit further along at this stage. He has that extra polish in his game and maybe even a higher ceiling if the development staff continues to put him in the right spots. But this is the beauty of it. We'll all find out together. That's what makes following these preseason battles so fun, especially for a team like the Knicks, that's building both for right now and for the years ahead. So, Knicks fans, I'll throw it to you. What do you think of these latest moves? Who do you want to see locked into that rookie deal? Drop your thoughts in the comments below, because I know this is a debate a lot of fans are having. Make sure to hit that like button, subscribe if you haven't already, and turn on post notifications so you don't miss a single update. Thank you so much for watching. Enjoy the rest of your day, and as always, go Knicks. It's confirmed, folks. The New York Knicks just keep making moves. And honestly, sitting down to watch NBA Today earlier, that was the exact vibe in the studio. The panel couldn't stop pointing out how aggressive Leon Rose and the front office have been in rounding out this roster. They're not standing still, they're not being passive. Every time we think the Knicks are done, they go ahead and add someone new. And the way they framed it on the show, this isn't just about filling out a camp roster. This is about building a group that can legitimately compete for the final. So here's what went down. The Knicks have brought back a familiar face, and at the same time, they've added more depth at a spot that really needed it. And Mike Brown, stepping into his first training camp as the Knicks' head coach, clearly wants players around him that he knows, guys he's seen up close before. That was emphasized on NBA Today. They said this isn't just a random signing spree. There's a purpose, there's a strategy, and it's tied directly to how Brown wants to build this team's identity. Now let's take a step back and think about the whole offseason. It started quiet, right? Nothing too flashy. Yeah, there were those crazy rumors floating around about Giannis, or even LeBron for a hot minute, but nobody really expected those to materialize. Instead, what we actually saw was smart depth moves, adding Jordan Clarkson, bringing in Gershon Yabusele, and then, after that, a stretch of silence. And for a while, it looked like that was it, that maybe they were holding on to that extra roster spot for someone like Landry Shamet or even Ben Simmons. Simmons, of course, said no. Shamet and Malcolm Brogdon went elsewhere. Garrison Matthews was also in the mix. And for a while, it felt like, okay, one of those guys is probably getting the final roster spot. But then came the twist. On NBA Today, they highlighted how Leon Rose has basically decided, why choose early? Why settle? Instead, invite as many capable guys as possible and let them fight for it in training camp. And that's exactly what happened when news broke, first reported by Stephen Bondi, that Matt Ryan has signed a deal with the Knicks to join them at camp. And that immediately sparked a discussion on the show because Ryan is not just another body. He actually played 19 games for the Knicks last season. He's a familiar face. And even though he didn't have the strongest showing, he only hit 31.6% of his threes, which is rough for someone whose only job was really to space the floor. There's still something there. They pointed out that the context matters. Ryan is a New York native from White Plains, and that connection is real. He's already been in the organization, both with the Knicks and with the Westchester Knicks in the G League. And with training camp literally taking place in White Plains, it makes sense he'd want to come back and give it another go. From his perspective, it's the perfect situation. If he makes the team, great. If he doesn't, he probably slides right into the Westchester Knicks and keeps grinding, close to home. NBA Today also made it clear this isn't some meaningless Exhibit 9 contract. These deals, sure, they guarantee you a G League spot if you don't make the roster, but the Knicks have shown they're not afraid to reward guys who stand out. If Ryan comes in and outplays Shamet or Matthews or anyone else they've invited, they'll give him the contract. That's the culture Leon Rose is building. Merit-based competition, not just names on paper. And when you look at the bigger picture, this is exactly the kind of move that shows how serious the Knicks are. They're not focused on being flashy right now. They're focused on surrounding their core with reliable shooting, reliable depth, and players who know their role. Matt Ryan may not have succeeded last time, but the opportunity is there again. And the Knicks are basically saying, prove yourself, and the job is yours. And then came the other piece of news that really caught everyone's attention on NBA Today. The Knicks have officially added another veteran to their camp roster, Alex Len. And let me tell you, this one raised some eyebrows in the studio because it's not just about adding another name, it's about addressing a real need. Now, the big picture here is obvious. The Knicks needed more depth at center. Sure, they've got Karl-Anthony Towns, Mitchell Robinson, Ariel Hukporti, and Gershon Yabusele, who can technically spend time in the middle. But when you break that down, the situation looks thinner than it appears on paper. Yabusele isn't really a true five. Mitchell Robinson has had his share of injuries over the years, and Hukporti, as talented as he is still coming off a torn meniscus and doesn't have the NBA resume to be relied on just yet. That's a lot of question marks for a team trying to compete at the highest level. So, what do you do in that situation? You go grab a steady, experienced big man, and that's where Alex Len comes in. He's 32 years old, he's been around the league, and he knows exactly what his role is. That's the kind of insurance policy Mike Brown and Leon Rose were looking for, and the connection here is important. Brown coached Len during their time together in Sacramento. So this isn't some blind signing. Brown knows exactly how to use him. And that makes the fit a lot smoother than if they had gone with another name like Thomas Bryant, who was also reportedly on their radar. The panel on NBA Today brought up something that really stuck with me. This is the Knicks using their relationships to their advantage. It's not about going out and overpaying for a star. It's about building depth with players the coach trusts. And in a season where expectations are sky high, those little trust points matter. Now, to put this in perspective, Alex Len isn't coming in to be a game changer. Last season, he averaged just over 8 minutes per game between the Kings and the Lakers. His numbers? 1.6 points, 2.1 rebounds, and assist, while shooting 51% from the field. Nothing flashy. But defensively, he was solid. He actually had a positive defensive box, plus-minus. And in a limited role, that's exactly what you want. Someone who won't hurt you, who will set screens, rebound, and protect the rim in short stretches. NBA Today also touched on Len's history, and it really does make for an interesting case study. He entered the league as the 5th overall pick in the 2013 draft. And let's be honest, that draft class has gone down as one of the weakest in modern NBA history, at least at the very top. The expectations on lottery picks are always sky high. And in his case, there was real hype surrounding what he could become. Back then, being taken that high automatically meant people expected you to grow into a franchise cornerstone, someone who could carry a team, or at least be a long-term starter. But that particular draft ended up being notorious for the number of players who failed to live up to those expectations. It wasn't just one or two misses, it was an entire group at the top that never fully reached the level scouts had projected. There were some bright spots scattered throughout, but for the most part, it became a cautionary tale of how a draft class can look full of potential on paper and still fall flat when those players hit the NBA. Len found himself grouped into that narrative, and over time, the reputation stuck. Talented? Yes, but not the kind of player who would ever define a franchise. Now, does that mean he failed as a pro? Not exactly. He's carved out a decade-long career in the league, which is no small accomplishment. Few players last that long, and the fact that he's still getting looks from competitive teams tells you there's value in what he brings. The truth is, the label of being a top 5 pick has followed him his entire career, and in many ways, that's been both a blessing and a burden. On one hand, it got him opportunities early on that other players might not have received. On the other, it created expectations he was never realistically going to meet. That's why his role with the Knicks now feels so much clearer. Nobody's asking him to be the star or the centerpiece. Nobody's expecting him to transform into the kind of dominant player scouts once imagined. At this stage, the Knicks just want reliability. Someone who understands the game, who can give them solid minutes, set hard screens, box out, and bring physicality when called upon. And that shift in expectations is what makes this signing make sense. For a team that's chasing depth and stability rather than gambles and question marks, Len fits exactly what they need. Another important detail mentioned, both Matt Ryan and Alex Len are not eligible for two-way contracts. They've been in the league too long, so if they stick with the Knicks, it's on a standard roster spot. That's where things get interesting, because it means real competition. Remember, the Knicks can carry a max of 21 players into training camp, and as Stefan Bondi pointed out, Matt Ryan and Trey Galloway are expected to be in that group too. By bringing in Len, the Knicks are signaling that they want camp battles to decide who stays and who goes. And here's the kicker. If they plan to keep both Ryan and Len, it probably means a trade is coming. Right now, the names being floated in those conversations are Tyler Kolek, Pacome Dadiet, Deuce McBride, and Mitchell Robinson. Personally, I don't see McBride or Robinson being moved, but the fact that it's even being mentioned shows just how much shuffling might still happen before opening night. Bottom line, the Knicks aren't just filling out their camp roster for the sake of it. They're being strategic, they're leaning on connections, and they're making sure Mike Brown has as many trusted options as possible. Adding Alex Len doesn't change the Knicks' ceiling, but it gives them security at one of the most fragile positions on their roster, and that could prove critical when the season gets rolling. The Knicks have done it again, and honestly, this is exactly the kind of move that fans have been waiting for. New York has just added an elite wing to their training camp roster, and alongside that, they've filled one of their open two-way roster spots by quietly resigning Kevin McCuller Jr., a player who brings that defensive toughness and versatility that the team desperately needs. On SportsCenter earlier today, the hosts broke down all the details, and I've got to tell you, as I watched it, I felt like I was seeing the Knicks quietly plotting some of the smartest moves in the league. If you're a Knicks fan, you know these types of signings don't always make the headline, but they could have a massive impact once the season starts. Let's start with the new wing, Tosen Ebuman. This signing is exactly what I wanted to see from New York. The team had already added depth in the guard positions, strengthened the front court with centers, but the wing spot had been the glaring hole on the roster. I've been saying it for months. If the Knicks are going to take the next step, they need size, athleticism, and defensive versatility on the wing. And now, they've finally answered that call. NBA insider Michael Scott from Hoops Hype was the first to break the news, confirming that Ebuman has agreed to join the Knicks for training camp. Ian Begley from SNY also verified the details, highlighting that the Knicks currently have 2 open two-way spots, and that Ebuman is a prime candidate for one of them. Tosen is 6'8", athletic, and capable of playing both forward positions. Last season with the Brooklyn Nets, he averaged 9.5 points, 4 rebounds, and 2 assists across 28 starts, showing he can contribute in multiple areas. This isn't a player who only fills a box score, he elevates the game around him. His college career at Princeton was nothing short of impressive, where he earned Ivy League Player of the Year honors and helped lead the Tigers to a Sweet 16 appearance. On SportsCenter, they highlighted how that kind of basketball IQ and work ethic translates perfectly to the Knicks system. He's someone who can make an immediate impact in camp and, if he performs, secure a two-way contract that would allow him to play up to 50 NBA games this season. The hosts also emphasized that this signing isn't just about filling a spot on the roster. The Knicks are being strategic. With a two-way contract, Ebuman gets the chance to play significant minutes, contribute immediately, and develop alongside some of the team's more established players. This is a chance to create real depth without compromising financial flexibility. The Knicks are trying to stay under the second apron, and every contract decision matters. Two-way deals are perfect for this. They give the team flexibility, maintain cap space, and allow young players to grow in meaningful roles rather than just sitting in the G League. And speaking of two-way contracts, that's where Kevin McCuller Jr. comes in. The signing of McCuller was quietly done, and it didn't get much press. On SportsCenter, they pointed out that it's easy to overlook these moves because they don't dominate the headlines, but McCuller's impact cannot be understated. He's a defensive-minded wing who brings energy, versatility, and a high basketball IQ. Exactly the type of player that complements the roster. Filling one of the two-way spots with McCuller allows the Knicks to maintain depth while giving him the chance to contribute in multiple games throughout the season. In summary, this is a two-pronged move that works perfectly for New York. They add an elite wing in Tosen Ebuman, who has upside, size, and the ability to impact both ends of the floor, and they quietly resecure Kevin McCuller Jr., a proven defensive presence, without stretching their financial limit. On SportsCenter, the analysts stressed that this is a blueprint for building a smart, deep, and competitive roster. It might not grab national headlines like a blockbuster trade, but for a team trying to position itself as a legitimate contender, this is exactly the kind of calculated high IQ move that could pay dividends when the season starts. Now, moving on to Kevin McCuller Jr., this was another huge piece of news that was quietly revealed. And honestly, I don't think enough people are talking about it. On SportsCenter, the hosts made a big deal out of the fact that McCuller has officially signed a two-way contract with the Knicks, which means he's locked into one of the team's 3 two-way slots. That might sound like a minor detail, but it's actually huge because it immediately sets the tone for the kind of depth New York is aiming to develop this season. With McCuller taking one of those two-way spots, the Knicks only have 2 remaining, and it's clear that management sees him as someone who can contribute right away while also continuing to grow into a more impactful player. The analysts on the show were glowing about McCuller's defensive capabilities, and let me tell you, they're not exaggerating. This is a player who has drawn comparisons to Josh Hart, and I've said it before. I'll say it again. Imagine having a younger, cheaper version of Josh Hart coming off your bench, bringing energy, defensive intensity, and the ability to contribute in multiple areas of the game. On SportsCenter, they emphasize that Kevin is more than just a defensive presence. Sure, he can lock down wings, guard multiple positions, and make life difficult for opposing scorers. But he's also developed a reliable offensive game. During Summer League, we saw him push the pace, attack the rim, and knock down shots, clearly trying to prove that he's a well-rounded player, not just a defender. Even while dealing with minor injuries, he showed flashes of what he can bring to the table offensively. And now, entering this season fully healthy, the expectation is that he's going to be a force both in the G League and in any minutes he earns with the Knicks. One of the main points the hosts stressed is that McCuller represents exactly what New York needs in a player, someone willing to buy into the system, accept a role, and develop within the team's structure. He's sacrificing immediate playing time in exchange for growth, and that's a mentality that the Knicks have been prioritizing. This is the kind of player who will work tirelessly, maximize his minutes, and when the opportunity comes, turn into a crucial contributor off the bench. Think of it like Miles McBride's progression. Players who embrace their role, focus on development, and seize the moment often become the difference makers in key games. SportsCenter also touched on his versatility. McCuller has experience as a point guard and possesses the size and athleticism to play the wing. That combination makes him a perfect backup for multiple positions, and he can easily slide into lineups with other young wings without disrupting the team's rotation. He's a high-effort, low-cost option for the Knicks, a player who gives you impact and energy while barely affecting the salary cap because of his two-way deal. In other words, He's exactly the kind of smart, strategic acquisition that sets up New York for long-term success. Finally, the show briefly shifted to the broader context, talking about belief in the team heading into the season. They highlighted that even the odds makers are starting to respect the Knicks' trajectory. FanDuel's latest NBA Finals odds have New York back at number 3 at plus 900, right behind the Thunder and Cavaliers. That's a huge nod, showing that the perception around this team is changing. With smart signings like Tosen Ebuman and McCuller Jr., the Knicks are building depth, athleticism, and defensive versatility. Exactly the kind of pieces you need to make a serious push in the playoffs. At the end of the day, what I took from SportsCenter is that New York isn't just filling roster spots. They're making intentional moves, finding players who fit their culture, and creating options that allow for flexibility, development, and impact. McCuller and Ebuman might not make the front-page headlines like a star free agent, but their contributions could end up being just as meaningful once the games start. And that's exactly the blueprint the Knicks are trying to execute this season. And finally, let's wrap up with what's happening right now with the Knicks. Because honestly, this is an exciting time to be following this team. The Knicks have not only signed Tosen Ebuman, an athletic, versatile wing, but they've also brought back McCuller Jr. on a two-way contract, which is huge. I mean, think about it. The Knicks' regular season roster is already stacked. Their bench unit looks promising, and now their training camp roster is shaping up to be one of the deepest and most competitive groups we've seen in years. And this isn't just random signing for the sake of numbers. They're actually building real NBA depth, smartly and strategically. What's amazing about this is how methodical the Knicks are being under Leon Rose. He's clearly not finished making moves. No way. The goal here is to make this training camp legendary, to create genuine competition for every roster spot, and to make every player earn their minutes. You don't just throw names on a roster, you invite talent, you push everyone to their limits, and you see who can rise to the challenge. That's exactly what they're doing with Tosen and McCuller Jr., two players who might not have been headline stars yet, but who can make a massive impact if given the chance. Under Mike Brown, in his first year as head coach, this kind of strategy is vital. You build a culture of accountability and performance, and these signings exemplify that. Tosen brings the size, athleticism, and versatility the Knicks desperately needed on the wing, while McCuller Jr. brings defensive intensity and championship-level effort off the bench, which is invaluable for any team trying to compete at the highest level. When you think about it, these moves aren't just about the next few games. They're about setting the tone for the season, sending a message that every spot on this team must be earned. And here's the part that really excites me. With the two-way contracts still up for grabs, training camp is going to be a real proving ground. Players are going to fight for those final spots, and the Knicks are going to evaluate every single performance with an eye toward maximizing talent while maintaining flexibility under the cap. This is how you turn a training camp into something meaningful and impactful. You're not just going through the motions, you're building depth, competitiveness, and ultimately a team that can make noise in the playoffs. So, when you look at the bigger picture, signing an elite wing in Tosen Ebuman and re-signing McCuller Jr., these aren't just smart moves, they're championship-level moves. It's the kind of forward-thinking strategy that fits perfectly with a team that has genuine aspirations to compete for the title. And honestly, it's refreshing to see. Just when you think the Knicks can't surprise you anymore, they go ahead and do exactly that, showing that they're committed to building a roster that's versatile, deep, and battle-tested. Now, I want to hear from you guys. What do you think about Tosen joining the Knicks and McCuller Jr.? Returning to New York? Are you as excited as I am about the kind of depth and talent the Knicks are stacking on this roster? Drop your thoughts in the comments below because I really want to know what you think. And that's going to do it for this update. If you enjoyed this breakdown, go ahead and hit that like button, leave a comment, and of course, subscribe to the channel so you don't miss any future Knicks update. Until next time, Knicks fans, take care of yourselves, your families, and each other. Peace. On SportsCenter today, They actually broke down a move that kind of flew under the radar, but really grabbed my attention. The New York Knicks, who have already been busy this offseason, just made what the analysts called a sneaky signing. The kind of deal that doesn't make a ton of noise on social media, but could quietly pay off in a big way once the season gets going. They were talking about forward Tosen Ebuman, who has officially agreed to a deal with the Knicks. And you know, the way it was presented on the show, it felt less like a throwaway move and more like a calculated addition by Leon Rose and the front office. Ebuman, who's just 24 years old, played with the Brooklyn Nets last season and gave them 9.5 points and about 4 rebounds per game in 28 appearances. That might not sound flashy at first, but the panel reminded us of something important. He did that as a young player on a team with almost no structure, no identity, and very little stability. What stood out to me was how they described him. He's not a specialist, not someone who does just one thing. He's a do-it-all type of wing, a guy who can rebound, defend multiple positions, move the ball, and chip in scoring when needed. On a team like the Knicks, where depth and versatility are everything, those are exactly the kinds of qualities Tom Thibodeau valued. They even said that Ebuman has the type of high motor and high IQ that fits perfectly into New York's culture. He's not the kind of player who comes in looking for touches or a starring role. He's the kind of player who fills gaps and makes a roster tougher. Now, to be clear, this is a one-year, non-guaranteed deal. It's essentially a camp opportunity, but the Knicks do have 2 open two-way contract spots, and the insiders pointed out that Ebuman is already a prime candidate to grab one of those spots. If that happens, he'd stick around all season as part of the Knicks' developmental pipeline. And if you've been following New York's recent history, you know they've done an excellent job turning overlooked players into real contributors. The show also highlighted Ebuman's background. They called him an Ivy League legend because of what he accomplished at Princeton, where he averaged 16 points a game and led the Ivy League in assists for back-to-back years. That combination of scoring and playmaking from a forward spot is rare, and it shows he's always been more than just an athlete. He's a thinker on the court. One of the more interesting parts of the discussion was when they compared him to some of the players Brooklyn kept instead. Nets fans on social media were already venting, saying Ebuman was better than names like Tyson Etienne, E.J. Little, Kobe Bufkin, Ricky Council-Four, Jalen Wilson, and Derek Whitehead. Yet, Brooklyn still cut ties with him. That's why so many fans are calling this a Knicks steal, because it feels like New York picked up a player their crosstown rival overlooked. And here's the thing. He's already shown flashes of being a capable shooter. When he had a short stint with the Detroit Pistons before landing in Brooklyn, he shot 41% from 3. That's not something you can ignore, especially on a Knicks team that still needs consistent perimeter shooting. If their development staff can help him find that rhythm again, you suddenly have a 6'8" wing who can defend, rebound, make plays, and stretch the floor. So, what does this really mean for New York? On SportsCenter, the takeaway was simple. This is a low-risk, high-reward move. Even if Ebuman doesn't make the final roster, there's almost no downside here. But if he sticks, if he grabs that two-way contract and earns Thibodeau's trust, then the Knicks might have quietly found another rotation piece without giving up anything. And when you think about it, that's exactly how contenders build championship-level depth. Not just with the big names like Jalen Brunson or Julius Randle, but with the guys who can step in, play their role, and swing a game on the margins. On SportsCenter today, one of the things that really stood out to me was the discussion about how this latest Knicks signing fits into the bigger picture. The analysts made it clear that this isn't just some throwaway move. It's the type of under-the-radar addition that could really help shape the depth of the roster going into training camp. And I've got to be honest, listening to the way they broke it down, it makes a lot of sense. They talked about how the Knicks desperately needed more help on the wing, and this new signing directly addresses that. The comparison that kept coming up was with Josh Hart, because of the way this player plays with so much energy, toughness, and willingness to throw his body around. That's the type of guy who can step in if Hart misses a stretch of game, which has happened in the past just because of how hard he plays. And when you think about OG Anunoby as well, who's dealt with injuries throughout his career, having another wing who can actually step in and provide solid minutes is a huge luxury for New York. Another important point that came up on the show was the contract situation. And honestly, this might be just as significant as the signing itself. The Knicks still have 2 open two-way spots on the roster, and from everything being discussed, this move is shaping up to fill one of them. Now, that might sound like a small detail at first glance, but when you dig a little deeper, it's actually a major storyline. Having a player on a two-way contract means he can suit up for up to 50 regular season games. And in a season that stretches over 6 months with injuries, back-to-backs, and constant lineup adjustments, those 50 games can become absolutely critical. On SportsCenter, they really emphasize this point. This isn't just about signing a young prospect and parking him in Westchester with the G League squad. This is about creating meaningful NBA depth, keeping the rotation flexible, and at the same time, being careful with the financial side of things. The broader context is that every roster spot matters when you're a team with playoff aspirations, and every dollar counts when you're operating so close to the second apron. That's why the conversation naturally shifted to the bigger picture of how the Knicks are managing their contracts. One of the names that came up in the discussion was tied to speculation about a rookie minimum deal. The initial thought was that this type of contract would be a straightforward way for the team to add another young piece, but then the technicalities of the CBA got in the way. Because this player already logged NBA service time, the option of giving him a rookie minimum was completely off the table. Instead, the only pathway left would be a veteran's minimum, and that comes with a higher cap hit. And here's where things get complicated. The Knicks, as the show pointed out, are being very strategic about staying under that second apron. For anyone who hasn't followed the new CBA rules closely, the second apron isn't just a number. It comes with serious restrictions. Teams that go over lose a lot of flexibility. You're limited in trades. You can't aggregate contracts the same way. And the margin for error in roster construction gets razor thin. For a franchise like New York, which has been carefully plotting its moves over the last couple of years, avoiding that penalty zone is a priority. So, in simple terms, it's not just about who the Knicks like as a player. It's about what type of contract they can realistically afford to give out, how that fits under the cap, and whether it allows them to keep the rest of their roster intact. On SportsCenter, they made it clear. This isn't simply about adding another name to the bench, it's about threading the needle between player development, depth, and financial discipline. What that means is the front office has to make some tough decisions. On the show, they laid it out very clearly. The Knicks have enough room to keep veteran signings like Shamet, Brogdon, or Garrison Matthews, while also bringing in one rookie on a minimum deal. But the rookie spot seems like it's going to Mohamed Diawara, not McCuller. That's the direction the team appears to be leaning. And let me just say, the debate around Diawara versus Dane Pate was one of the most interesting parts of the segment. The hosts pointed out that in Summer League, Diawara wasn't spectacular. He averaged about 8 points and struggled with efficiency. Meanwhile, Pate looked stronger statistically, giving you double figures in scoring, around 5 or 6 rebounds, and shooting the ball better from deep. But despite that, it seems the Knicks believe Diawara is the better fit moving forward. Maybe it's about long-term upside, maybe it's about positional need, but the decision says a lot about how this front office is evaluating their young players. The takeaway here is that New York is being very deliberate. Every move they've made, whether it was Shamet, Brogdon, Matthews, and now this, shows that they're focused on balancing immediate depth with future potential. The analysts on SportsCenter summed it up perfectly. This isn't about making a splashy headline signing. This is about putting together a roster that's ready for an 82-game grind, one that can handle injuries and one that can stay flexible as the season unfolds.